Politics! Hi, I'm James.
You're really trying to get us demonetized already, huh?
I just said politics. We're not actually talking about politics. We're talking about probably one of the most heated topics in all of anime.
Politics. Subs vs. Dubs is what we're talking about today. I'm still Kyle, and this is my lovely grasshopper friend here.
I'm the grasshopper? Okay. I can't.
Are you the youngest of us? Does that make you a grasshopper?
I can't fight that.
Exactly.
What,
Moving on.
Give
Today,
me something a little more cool?
No.
Okay.
Today we are talking about why subs have kind of got this toxic culture to them and why dubs have kind of always been good. Take it away, my friend.
So, as someone who enjoys a very weirdly niche section of the anime sphere, I have found myself more consistently watching dubs than subs. I know I'm not a real anime fan, nor do I know what I'm talking about. But funny thing, it doesn't matter. I get there's this whole thing with like dubs can't translate correctly, but it gets the basic story across. And I hate to break it to you, but story's a story's a story. Yes, I do watch subtitles, but I'm only going to watch subtitles either the first time around or after I've watched the dub and I already get the gist of everything and I want to see what the original translation through sub was like. But now subs and dubs are getting so good that these subtitles are almost word for word the dub. So there's not really much of a point in watching the subtitles when you can watch the dub, or my favorite, you can have the Japanese subtitles with the dub, and all you have to worry about is like one word changes.
So let's talk about where all this came from originally. There was only around 2 to 3, maybe 4 studios that were doing dubs back in the day, and they were pretty bad at them. Like, you look at 4Kids dubs that were just historically trash, and they're the way that they messed up Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, everything that was on the Fox box growing up basically got destroyed by 4Kids. And that's where a lot of that like stigma comes from, where people feel like they can't get the same content or context because they were also editing these for children on top of that. So that was like the big issue where dubs really got their stigma to it. And then it progressively got better over time as Funimation got better at it, as other studios continued to roll out and be better about this and realizing that the context of the original story matters a lot more. So now when the dub of Demon Slayer comes out, it's basically a 1-to-1 bar and there's not a lot of changing in between. And plus you have actors that are getting more into their roles and understanding the purpose of the story instead of just reading lines, which is what happened a lot of the time before, like in the early 90s, that we can forgive by this point. So
that's also to mention the fact that at this time, America really stigmatized animation as something not for adults and that there couldn't really be adult animation. Yes, there were shows that were definitely adult and animated as well as movies, but the common thought process, you can see this most clearly through the Oscars, is that animation for kids. You can't have dark adult animation. That equals bad. And it's like, not necessarily. While in Japan, it was very different. Animation was for everybody, and anybody, adult or not, could enjoy animation. Just go watch Akira for 5 minutes, because dear God, that's
very dark.
A little dark. So now that we've seen this, it hasn't gotten as good as I'd like it to be, but we have seen this destigmatization of cartoons being only for kids and animation only being for kids. And now we've seen that in America and American animation, we're starting to see this break from that mindset. We're also starting to see anime become a legitimate thing for both adults and kids to watch. And that it's not just for kids anymore, it's now for everybody, because dear God, children should not be watching or reading Berserk.
Right. So there's 2 factors that I believe really kind of paved the way towards where we live right now. And I think that's the Simpsons and other adult cartoons that kind of, yes, they were comedies and they weren't in the anime realm, but it got people realizing that like these shows can be for adults and they can be funny and enjoyable and still as awesome as live action stuff. So instead of trying to make all of the anime live action so an American audience can enjoy it, like Dragon Ball Evolution that we try to forget about on a daily basis, we can actually just get more high quality movie versions of animations where you look at, again, Dragon Ball Evolution's verse superhero, right? Which is bar for bar an infinitely better story because you just let them live in the realm that they actually existed in. And you had both a sub and dub that were both incredible.
Yes, very much so. It is. I can definitely agree that The Simpsons being something not just for kids, or well, never really was for kids, anyways, now proving that animation can be for adults, and then you have
Especially in
boom.
America.
Oh, very much so. You have the boom of all those adult animated sitcoms that prove that, like, no, animation can be for adults. And then I would like to add that in the modern era, we now have things like Spider Verse, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish.
Is not given
Uh,
enough credit.
oh my
Actually,
God,
it's
no!
really a dark story.
Nimona. Uh, it's hard to bring them up because they tend to get pushed down due to media. But there are a plethora of others. Comment section, you can have my ass for that. Plenty of other wonderful animated movies that came out recently that are definitely aimed at kids, but aren't just for kids.
Yeah, like even
Yeah.
the Ninja Turtles movie. I
Oh
think
my
is
God,
a
I
very
forgot
good
that one.
example of like how we basically were going for this Pixar look for a long time. Like everyone was trying to match the Pixar look. Like if you were going to do a live action or a animated feature film, it had to look like a Pixar Disney movie. And the Spider-Verse really kind of changed that.
Oh yes.
And they were the first one to take that big risk of being like, we don't want to do this, but we're going to do it with a character that you love. You may not know that you love him, but you love Spider-Man and you are going to love Miles Morales. And they did that so well to the point that we were able to open the doors to movies like Ninja Turtles coming out, or there was another one that's kind of in that same realm, but I forget right now. But we're now unlocking different like animation styles for these blockbuster movies, which is amazing. And not everything looks like they're just trying to be a Disney and Pixar movie. And I think that is the future of how everything plays forward. And anime is just a part of the story as well.
And what's awesome is that now that we're seeing this diversity in animation, that we have Spider-Verse, which can mash so many different animation styles together, which is a feat unto its own. I tried my hand at animation once and I stopped
And
because
how'd
I
that
couldn't
go?
figure it out. It was awful, but I know the process, and seeing so many different styles of animation at once, it's like, oh. And then now seeing this diversity in the different styles of animation, now that we're seeing what I basically call the absurdist era of animation, and that people just make whatever the hell they want, and it's brilliant. Now people are more accepting of anime because anime has always been a different art style from what we've seen in animation here over in the West. In the West, you have basically the Disney setup for 2D animation, and it's like very fluid, very flowy. They have a very similar Disney style facial structure. Anime can be whatever the hell it wants, and it can look as different as it wants because it's all different studios and different artists and different people building up these stories. Like, go watch Full Metal Alchemist and then go watch JoJo, and you will immediately notice the difference in art and characters. Like, go read the original mangas and you'll notice there's such a stark contrast. And that's because you have so many different artists building and drawing these worlds. And I think that's also a different part, is that anime isn't there's no solidarity in the art style, and that can tend to turn people off because they're like, I don't like this art style.
Yeah, and also art styles changing in between seasons too.
Oh,
that
very much so.
happens more often in anime as both 2D animation and 3D animation begin to hybrid together. And we're at a point where it's like, it feels like One Piece is changing their animation every arc at this point. You know what I mean? But it gets better and it gets more wild and crazy every time you push forward. And that's okay. And sometimes when it's not okay is like season 3 of Attack on Titan and like certain things like that. But it's when you try something else, and I guess for an extent like Dragon Ball Super, right? Like Dragon Ball Super, people didn't like the animation style because they wanted the like Dragon Ball Z, but they're still trying to go for something different. And I think they are onto something with the animation style that Dragon Ball Superhero was. So they're blending the 2D and 3D elements, and I think that will probably be the direction forward for them. It's going to make all of the classic 90s fans kind of mad, but I think redoing it in that same aspect, because the guy that did Superhero wants to reboot the entire series. So he wants to reanimate everything frame by frame, which is wild to me. I don't know how big of a project that takes, but if he does do that, because we have a remaster of One Piece coming out, we have a remaster of Dragon Ball coming out, we have like all of these classic animes getting the future touch, and I cannot wait to see how all this plays out.
I hope these people like not having lives.
Yeah, no, that's a story for a different time on the sweatshop aspect of anime. But
and One Piece is the perfect case study for how animation has evolved throughout this entire medium, and how, as this medium has grown, so has the acceptance of it and the destigmatization of animation in our culture. And now we need to pass the final hurdle. Dubs are good now. Yeah, they were garbage when they initially started, but Cowboy Bebop's dub, which has not been changed since its original 90s run, is some of the best dub acting in that era. I do not care for the original Evangelion dub, which was the 90s, but it was still spectacular. And now we have dubs that are beautiful and incredible. So don't be afraid to watch a dub.
Yeah, the story's a story.
So I just jumped on camera real quick to add a little of the old man perspective. During the 90s, there was a fantastic segment on MTV where they introduced new animations.
Okay.
One, Eon Flux, which they then turned into a live-action movie with Charlize Theron.
Okay.
I believe she actually broke her back on that movie, but obviously healed, thankfully.
Right.
And fantastic one based on a comic book called The Max, which was this giant purple dude. And the animation, I mean, this is 90s, and it was cutting edge. And then George Plimpton, not the personality, writer, actor, but the artist, would do these amazing like experimental animations of like a head and then being swallowed by another mouth. And it was just fascinating. And MTV, at the same time The Simpsons was starting, was getting into this animation. And they started right from the beginning. This is adult. We're not pandering to kids. This is adult style animation. So I think MTV, which now leads to Nickelodeon, which leads to Paramount, really also jumped in on this and helped give us this early adult animation. Now, those were American. They were not transported, imported from anywhere else. So we didn't have the subs and dubs issue. But it really got, I think, Americans my age accepting animation as entertainment and not just for kids. So that as we got older, and like a Seth MacFarlane got older, and he wanted to get into making the animation, that's when we all started like, oh, cool. So now we have a generation that grew up with it. They want to make it versus the boomers who are like, that's for kids. We're not going to do anything with that.
Cartoons are for kids, or animation for kids.
So I definitely agree with your evolution. I just think it goes a little more than just Simpsons, and it was.
Yeah, I mean, you could go Simpsons, South Park, all of this kind of, like, there's a lot more factors to that would lead us into probably an hour-long discussion. So,
but it's cool that it did. It's exactly what you said, and it wasn't just Simpsons was for kids. That's how it started. I remember being in 7th grade when it came out. And my buddy Kyle Palladino ran for president of student council on the platform The Simpsons. Very widely popular. But that it was made for kids. But then because it had the adult humor, adult could sit and watch it. And I hate to say this, we've gotten to a point where like Bluey.
Yeah.
Adults can sit and watch Bluey and it's still entertaining, but it is made for kids.
I watch it with my dog.
We're definitely more open to it. So I agree.
That's crazy. You hear that? He agrees about anime. That's wild. Mark this moment right here.
Yes, there are both subs and dubs. That's why I agree. Sorry, I just wanted to.
No, you're good.
We might not